Hi. Hello again. Hello. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you again. Where's Laura? Sorry. Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. And I delivered my budget earlier today, and it was a budget to cut the cost of living, to cut the debt and borrowing, and crucially to cut NHS waiting lists. And that's why I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon with people that make that happen, the nurses, the doctors, all the staff here at the hospital. And I want to say a big thank you to everything that you do. And I know that Kia and Wes said it to you earlier, but you know, you really are an inspiration, and to be able to come and see where that money is going is really, really important to me as we put the money into those new neighbourhood health centres and the new technology to use in the NHS to support patients, but also give you the tools that you need to do their job. I think we're going to take a few questions now from the media, Gemma, a few months ago I promised that Look North would get the first question post budget, and I'm going to deliver on my word, Gemma, so I'll talk directly to the people of West Yorkshire, but especially Leeds.
Yes, well, it's good to see you keep a promise, Chancellor. I was talking to people on the high street in Pudsey yesterday in your constituency, and it won't surprise you, they are really struggling with the cost of living. They see the price of things go up and up and up, and wages haven't kept pace with it. Businesses are still reeling after the measures in last year's budget, and today extending that freeze on income tax thresholds will really hit working people. So when you're back up north, what will you say to your constituents? Can you look them in the eye and say things are going to get better because of the budget?
So for people in Leeds, West and Pudsey, and people all around the country, in Yorkshire and beyond, there will be a reduction of £150 in your energy bills from April next year. That is tangible difference, money in the pockets of working people. And in addition to that, we're freezing NHS prescription charges. We're freezing train fares. So if you're getting on the train in Bramley or in New Pudsey, it's going to be a bit cheaper than it would have been next year. And we're doing all of those things because I know that the cost of living is still a real challenge for people, day to day, week to week, month to month, and that's why in this budget I am taking direct action to tackle the cost of living. But also, if you are being seen at LGI or St James's Hospital, or going to your GP surgery in Armley or Bramley, then also people will know that we're putting money into our NHS and those new neighbourhood health centres to take the pressure off the hospitals and have people treated closer to home. Next question, Shahab.
Chancellor, there was a lot of pressure on you and your government in the lead up to this budget. Plenty of backbenchers have expressed frustration and anger. In this budget, you have scrapped the two-child benefit cap, which has meant that some of them are quite happy. Do you think you've done enough to appease all of them?
My focus in the budget is on the country and the people who elected us into government last July. I know that the number one concern for people is the cost of living, which is why we've taken £150 off of people's bills by removing some of those levies and the eco scheme, which has been an utter failure, and using that money to cut people's bills. But I'm just chatting here to some of the nurses and other staff at the hospital. The two-child limit and getting rid of that has a benefit beyond those families, because so many patients who end up in hospital, so many kids who end up in hospital, are there because of respiratory conditions, be in poor quality temporary accommodation. The cost to local councils of that, but also the cost to the NHS and in our schools as well. When I talk to teachers, especially in schools, about going into school not because of the conditions at home, whether that's a cold house or not enough food to eat. So getting rid of the two-child limit is about addressing child poverty and also reducing some of those costs on other parts of the system, including in our schools. Beth.
Thank you. Chancellor, today you've announced that you're extending the freeze on tax thresholds. It will raise £8.3 billion. In the budget in 2024, you said extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their pay slips. I am keeping every single promise on tax. made in our manifesto. I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance, I will not increase your VAT, I will increase your income tax. Today you've just broken your manifesto pledges and your promise to millions of workers in the budget last year you would not extend the threshold. In good conscience, can you stay on in your job?
In the manifesto, we were very clear as the rates of income tax, national insurance and VAT. But I'm not going to get into this. I recognise that we are asking people to contribute more. Those allowances. They were already frozen by the previous government from 2021 to 2028, and we're freezing them for a further 3 years. And I do recognise that as ordinary people to pay a little bit more. But I've managed to keep that contribution as low as I possibly can by closing loopholes and asking you to pay more. That's why there will be a surcharge on properties worth $1 billion. It's why we're increasing taxes on savings and property. And we're getting a grip of some of the waste in the way by taking out of Motability, more placements for disability benefits, so we keep that contribution from working people as low as possible. This year and in the years going forward, we're taking £150 a year off of people's energy bills for working families and pensioners, and we're able to do that by taking it off of people's bills.
Can you just acknowledge you've broken a manifesto pledge? You have. The IFF.
Well, if you read the very clear of income tax, national insurance and VAT, you're asking, does this have a cost for working people? I acknowledge it does. I said that in the budget last year. I'm not going to do otherwise today, but I do think the right decision circumstances we've OBR have to close down their estimates of productivity and growth by 0.3%. They say that that will take out £6 of tax revenue we would otherwise have brought in. And they are very clear that is not because of any decision that this government has last 16 months. It is what's happened in the previous 14 years. Brexit, the pandemic, and frankly, the austerity and chaos from the previous government. And we're all having to pay a price to that. And it's my job to make sure that the numbers add up so that we can ensure we grow our economy, keep interest rates falling, and keep inflation down. Joe.
Chancellor Joe Pike, BBC News. The income tax thresholds will see millions of people paying more tax while at the same time are being increased. Is that really to working people? And a second question, if I may, when did you find out that they had unveiled your budget before you had?
As I said to Beth, I do recognise that freezing the income tax and national insurance thresholds for a further 3 years after the Conservatives for 7 years does mean that we're asking people to pay a little bit more. We're freezing them from 2028 and we are putting money in people's pockets now off their energy bills. Thing to do because it helps bring down people now that the cost of living is still a real challenge. And in answer to your question around the my budget before living, I found chamber. Paul.
Hello, Chancellor. Look, the OBR says that you will £6 billion a year for special educational needs, but you provided no explanation where this money came from. Schools are going to have to stump up the cash themselves. Guarantee per will not go down.
Next 2 years, clearly in this, we've extended the statutory override for local authorities, and we in the spending review. Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State for Education, is at the moment sent out money. That's about them that actually reads their parents' schools, and she the new year. I believe that we should, wherever possible, integrate children into mainstream schools. That's not always, but I would like to see that happening more. But it would be up to Bridget to set out those reforms. But as I say, we have extended the statute for the next, and we put more money into the schools budget just before the summer. Lewis from ITV Digital.
Hello, Chancellor. You minimum wage sounds like good news, but employment problem in this country, and you are freezing national insurance thresholds for employers. So isn't that stop businesses and drive up unemployment?
Increase the national minimum wage for 8-year-olds from £10.85. We've increased the minimum of the national living wage from £12.20 an hour, giving a paying around 2.5 million of the lowest paid people in our country. And that is the right thing to do, because if you go every day, you should be able to pay the bills and and pay the rent or the mortgage. But we know that that's reality for many people today. Paying minimum wage in the national still not the rates of a real living wage that is calculated independently. Something to increase money in people's pockets. The that don't have enough lending on the discretion, whether that's a meal, a night out, a weekend away with the family, high street and so putting more people economic policy as well do.
Price for your failure to deal with particularly the benefits bill?
We're not going to leave the welfare system unchanged. Under the previous government, in the last years of the Conservative government, spending on welfare increased by 1% of GDP, equivalent to £88 billion. The forecast share of GDP, welfare spending will be broadly flat, but I think it's broken. Some reforms so that if you live abroad, you can't pay nominal amounts of money, state pension, to face assessments for disability. Mel Stride, when he was secretary, reforming Motability, so it original purpose of affordable leases, not subsidising Mercedes-Benz. So those sorts of the right things to do, but we have introduced funding guarantee, which means that a young guaranteed an apprenticeship or personalised support, and if after 8 they haven't got in, they will be guaranteed but not benefits, and that again is an important reform to help deal with the issue of too many young people not in education, employment or training. And I'm sorry, on welfare, you know, we've already managed to claw back money from the contracts of the Tory government, and I think we've managed to claw back some £1 million, and we're going to phase out the use of hotels entirely during the course of this Parliament, saving us money, and that was reflected in the spending in the summer. So I do want a system that is actually and empowering people to get back into work, the and trafficking of people.
Sophie Huskisson. The union have said that freezing income tax threat is the opposite in work markets. Do you admit that you could have been braver, wealthiest in Britain?
So, as I've said, I realise that we are asking everyone to make a contribution for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. I said that in the speech today, and I also said in the speech today that I'm not going to pretend that that is not asking for a contribution. The Tories, when they were in office, froze the thresholds. Here, I'm honest that is from 2028, freezing thresholds for a bit longer, and that a cost. But we're putting money now in the pocket. It's pounds off their bills, money off of rail fares, of frozen prescription charges, as well as fully funding the childcare offer of 30 hours of free more free for half of parents are on universal, all these things in the ordinary working piece, the increases in the national minimum wage and the national set out today. But look, you can see the distribution analysis tables in the budget documentation that came out today. This is the budget. The biggest winners are those on the lowest incomes and those who were asking with the broadest shoulders. Those were £2 million. The landlord who pays less tax than their tenant. Those are the right things to do, and they're progressive reforms. The contribution from working as low as possible. Dan?
Hello, Chancellor. Tax rises that more than half of the income to the Treasury from the tax rises you've announced today actually takes effect, sort of comes in after the election in sort of 2031. It's crazy that they happen, and given time in politics, still be Chancellor then.
I don't think any that late, actually. It's a 20 onwards. The council tax surcharge comes in a couple of years' time, as does the other changes. So these are all this Parliament. When you're making tax reform, it's often not possible to change those rates overnight. And of course, the thresholds are because the Tories froze them. But we're also making savings right now through getting rid of things like police and crime commissioners, reducing the cost of local government with fewer councillors, as well as selling land that the government no longer has a need for. So there are savings we're making right now, as well as asking public services to make efficiency savings worth a further 0.5% from 28-29. So these are, and what you see actually in the forecast is the deficit coming down every single year, because I think it is important that we are consolidating. We're not going to be spending more than we can afford, and the IMF, I believe, have confirmed we have the fastest rate of consolidation finances of any country in the G7. I can do one more. She's the real boss. Yeah.
Anna Mihailova, Times Radio. A year ago, after a big budget, you said not becoming buses. You've just announced £1 trillion worth of tax rises, dragging hundreds of thousands of great income tax, nearly 1 million people into higher rate tax. Can you reassure people you will not be?
Well, look, last year I had to fill the 22 billion in the public finances left by the Conservatives. What we didn't know then, as well as that public finances, that productivity growth was weaker than the Office of Budget Responsibility then forecast. They've been really clear in their available before the budget that productivity forecast is 0.3 percentage points lower a year. Growth to the same amount reduces tax revenues by £60 million, and we can beat those forecasts. We've beat them this year. The OBR said the economy was going to grow by 1% this year. We've grown it by 1.5%. And we'll beat the forecasts. A Conservative legacy is not our country's destiny, but we also all experienced it just that if you ignore the pay a huge cost of government and then buy borrowing from Well, Richard Hughes and the OBR have confirmed that they have launched an investigation into what happened. It obviously was a serious breach. They've apologised for that and put out a full statement.
So leave aside, are you happy with the market reaction today?
I think it's best for chancellors not to comment on what's going on in the markets. But what I was determined to deliver today, as well as cuts to the cost of living and cuts to NHS waiting lists, was cutting borrowing and the debt. And you can see in the budget today the increase in headroom, more than doubling the headroom to £21.7 billion, and indeed meeting that target on the stability rule a year early.
When you talk about cutting borrowing, the Institute for Fiscal Studies says it's a spend now, pay later budget. What do you say to traders who are still concerned that this fiscal tightening is backloaded?
Well, listen to the IMF, and the IMF say that there is a faster rate of consolidation in the UK than in any G7 economy, and we see that that borrowing as a share of GDP falling right through the forecast period. After hovering around 5% for many years, we are actually getting that down.
Well, the Resolution Foundation says this budget leaves much of the fiscal repair job to 2028 and beyond.
Well, some tax reforms, like the high-value council tax surcharge, take a while to introduce, and also want to make sure that we get these things right. And similarly, the changes with the further freeze in the tax allowances, they've been frozen after they were already frozen for 7 years from 2028. But there are also real savings in spending right now, with better balance sheet management, cracking down on some of the waste and inefficiencies, and indeed introducing a further efficiency drive within our public services. So this is not all about tax. We've also taken measures on the spending side as well.
You mentioned the freeze on income tax thresholds for 3 years. It's going to create millions of new taxpayers. Do you accept that features the spirit of your manifesto?
Well, the manifesto was clear that we wouldn't increase the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. But I do recognise, and I said this clearly in the House of Commons today, that freezing the thresholds for a further 3 years after they were already frozen for 7 years under the previous government does mean that I'm asking ordinary people to contribute more. I think that is a fair thing to do in the wake of the